A man named John Henry Irons' parents were murdered when he was young, and since then, he had been driven to pursue wealth and accumulate power, reasoning that such things would protect him from another tragedy like this ever happening again. Winning a sports scholarship, he went to Yale and became a ballistics expert, hired by a company called Ameritech Industries. He had earned the wealth and success he had sought and used this money to help his surviving relatives. However, he was horrified to learn that his work at Ameritech was being used by criminals and left the company in disgust, working as a steelworker in Metropolis under an assumed name when he first encountered Superman. Superman fell to the might of the terrible villain known as Doomsday. John witnessed this event and was trapped in a collapsed building. In the weeks that followed the Man of Steel's death, John forged a suit of armor, boots to enable him to fly, an S emblem, and a cape in honor of the now deceased Superman. He began to pursue the source of where his weapons were being sold to criminals, and now in the public eye, he was identified as one of 4 potential candidates who were all thought to be potentially Superman returned to this world. Unlike the others, John always had the least amount of convincing evidence to support this, and he never personally claimed to be the superhero reincarnated. He did, however, take on the namesake of the Man of Steel. As a superhero, John declined an offer of employment from Lex Luthor and met Lois Lane, admitting to her that he was not the actual Superman, unlike the others that had claimed to be the real hero returned to life. He eventually ran into these imposters, including Superboy and a being called the Eradicator. With the latter, the two fought to a standstill until this being ultimately retreated from the battle. John managed to track down and stop his weapons from being used illegally, at least for the time, and chose to continue operating as a superhero. When Coast City was destroyed, Steel investigated personally, encountering the real Superman who was finally returned to life. Though the others were skeptical of all of this, given the number of imposters around, this Superman, now wearing a black costume, proved to be the hero once thought dead, and John worked with Superman to save several other cities from various threats. With Superman returned, John modified his codename to simply Steel, and spent years working with heroes such as Supergirl, the Justice League of America, and other heroes tied to Superman. This version of Steel is currently missing, after his Earth was rewritten into a new multiverse of 52 worlds. A new version of Steel currently operates on Earth Zero, with a similar personality and slightly modified backstory. But that version of Steel was never officially identified as Superman, just as a close ally of Kal-El. As of the Rebirth era, this version of Steel now bears a very similar resemblance to the original Steel, possibly reflecting the merged timelines that have incorporated the original John Henry Irons and his life into the current version of Steel, along with everyone else involved in Superman's life. It's unclear if Steel was one of the others involved in Superman's life that had their timelines merged when Superman was reborn into an amalgamated version of the New 52 version and the older version of Superman. But whatever the case, this hero remains a steadfast ally of the Man of Steel and a protector of all mankind. Hello and welcome to Comic Island. My name is Arden, and this is my origins and bio for Steel. So next up in our Superman journey is Steel, the first of the 4 Supermen who replaced Kal-El after he was killed in his battle against Doomsday. Each of the 4 are fun and different from each other, representing different aspects of Superman's character, while also bringing within themselves their own unique story and identity. None of them really follow the origins or original story of Superman in any of his forms, and thus each kind of have had their own memorable dent in Superman canon. And Steel is the first among them, and one of my favorites. He kind of represents the more humanitarian aspect of Superman's character. John Henry Irons, after all, is just an ordinary person who more or less develops his own gear that is what he uses to become a superhero. He really only has a peripheral connection to the original Superman, and it was largely thanks to the man inspiring him one day. There isn't much more than that, which frankly I enjoy quite a bit. I like a character like this that isn't so intimately connected to Superman, yet still robustly part of the Superman family. His new 52 origins, in comparison, are a lot more rooted in general lane than other characters within Superman's story, but I'd prefer they weren't. It's better to have a bigger world with its own stuff going on outside of Superman. The original Steel is independent of all those things, which is the take and approach for creating new characters within a superhero's mythos that I kind of prefer over someone who has origins directly tied into the original superhero in question. There's a lot of examples of characters like that created in the world of Batman and Spider-Man and even Superman himself. So to have someone completely different and isolated in a sense within his origins is fun and unique. And I enjoy Steel as he exists now. This owns a hero independent of others, yet more than willing to work with them, and is often called upon when Superman needs allies. His role in Revenge, which is just basically part of an impromptu team Superman puts together to fight all of his villains, was perfect, and the exact sort of thing where his character can really shine. And I think there's a future for him in film, aside from the one that already exists. I often forget that Steel has had his own movie because it's kind of forgettable. I remember seeing it one day when I was home from school sick, and I didn't hate the movie. It's not a bad movie. In fact, you could go a lot worse with movies of this era, especially along the lines of superheroes Blade. But it isn't anything remarkable either, and it just feels like a rip-off of RoboCop more than anything else. But Steel's much bigger than all of that, and hopefully we'll get to see a true iteration of the character going forward. And there's a lot of people out there who could play him. I like the idea of John Henry Irons as this slightly older character with a strong background in engineering. That can be a really cool focus for the character, which doesn't exist in a lot of other superheroes. It does in some, but John Henry Irons could represent the sort of creativity and ingenuity associated with the field of engineering in a fun way that we don't see as much as we could in fiction. So let me know what you think of this character in the comments section below. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep reading comics.